All right, Gemini. So I think it's funny that this is the one that flew out of the deck for you. So from the Halloween Oracle, Eternal Love. Love is love is love, and it transcends physical death. And then you pulled the Keeper of the Scales from the Hidden Realms, fairness and balance, and this did come up as a challenge for you. Now, looking at the two of them, for me, if you're talking about eternal love, this could definitely be talking about a partner or a person where there is a lot of love. It could be a family member. But then looking at, the Keeper of the Scales as a challenge, you're talking about somebody who is creating disharmony in your life right now. Now, this card is just reminding you that what goes around comes around, right? It very much is justice. But it being in the reverse here, or as a challenge, things are like out of whack for a lot of you concerning who you have love for, or a person that, you may be dealing with in a relationship. And it's basically saying that you need to let go of all people, behaviors, and conditions that bring you disharmony or bring you into disharmony. All right, Gemini, here we go. Here's your overall for the week. Ugh. And that may be why, you're going through this whole dealing with somebody who is creating unbalance in your life. The Seven of Swords. Now, with this being the overall, like I said, we can definitely be talking about a person here that is doing things that is not on the up and up, dealing with, deception and sneaky behavior. But this could also be about you, though, not wanting to discuss what you have planned. I see that with the Seven of Swords. It doesn't necessarily always have to be about somebody doing something shitty to you. It could just be that there are things that you're not wanting to discuss right now. A lot of times we'll make plans, but then not really talk about it because we don't know how we're going to move forward on it. But I do see this as more of a difficult type of overall here. But we'll see. Now, in the past, the Knight of Swords. What I get from this is, with that being the past, I feel more so that the reason why you're facing the Seven of Swords right now, if you're talking about an external person, is because you may have been really blunt and direct with them in the past. Because I don't know, I see this more so as you than the other person here. You may have been like really straight up and honest, but yet they're still like planning some shit. And then the other thing though too is, this one to me doesn't feel like conviction, not with the Seven of Swords being there. You could have acted too quickly though, and that may be why now some of you are just like, shh, like I'm just going to do me and then not involve anybody else. In the present, the Five of Pentacles. Ooh. Yeah. So, again, if we are talking about a person who is creating disharmony, when you're looking at the Five of Pentacles in the present moment, this is either going to be about what they're doing to you, or, if, for those of you who are dealing with another person here, this may be their circumstances looking at the Five of Pentacles, which you're talking about, casting somebody out, which may have been done to you, or, you doing this to them. And we can definitely be talking about somebody thieving some money here for sure. But we're definitely talking about somebody who is feeling like they are being pushed out, being on the outside looking in, being left out in the cold, right? Rejected. Future conditions, the Six of Cups. Now, this one very specifically is talking about happy memories. But the thing is what I don't like is, if we're looking at the Seven of Swords as the overall, if you have somebody who is coming back through, like, looking like they're trying to make amends, do they have ulterior motives? Now, this could simply just be saying that there's history there that you're looking back on, though, too. But then I look back at the past and I look at the Knight of Swords and think somebody was, like, pretty harsh and direct. But there may have been a reason for that. So are we going back to past actions, or are you looking at that and thinking that that wasn't the right way to do things, and now you're just you're doing your own thing, but you're not talking about it, right? But I don't know. I'm looking at the images and I think, you know, that Knight of Swords to me is sticking out as you, the action that you took in the past, you know, and I do think that, you know, you weren't wrong for doing that. I just think that, you know, maybe that wasn't the best way to go. But then I still feel like, you know, and this is only going to be for some of you dealing with a shyster, honestly. Oof, your best path to follow, the Ten of Swords, you know. And then one of the things that's being brought back up here is going back to eternal love. You know, if you're dealing with a situation that needs to end, you know, it doesn't mean that that's it for you when it comes to love. But then I also feel like, you know, this is difficulty for some of you surrounding somebody close to you. And again, it could be a family member, a friend, you know, doesn't necessarily have to be a lover. But anyway, looking at the Ten of Swords, right, as your best path to follow, it's basically saying it's over with now. It is over with. The worst is over with. You know, and it's time for you to get back up here instead of, you know, allowing yourself to continuously be put in situations with people where, you know, they want to betray you. I mean, that's basically that, you know. You know, but then I feel like, you know, needing to just leave the situation alone now. Just leave it alone. There's no reason to have this be brought back up. I don't know. I question it because, you know, and I need to see what's happening here as far as what's in your environment. Like, I'm always hinging on this, right? Because I look at this and think, that's great, but why is this still the overall? In your environment, the Eight of Wands. So if we're looking at that in connection to the Five of Pentacles, you're talking about, you know, things changing quickly here, where, you know, you're like quickly acting on a really bad situation here and trying to get it out of your life. But I almost feel like you may be dealing with somebody who's being a little bit persistent. You know, with the Eight of Wands, definitely we can be talking about the communication that's happening too. You know, somebody may be communicating to you that they are in a difficult situation, looking at the Five of Pentacles, and that may be why they're trying to make amends with you, looking at the Six of Cups. But again, you know, what are the motives here? That's what I'm questioning with that Seven of Swords, and I don't like it. And then your advice is like, it's over. It is over. And I almost feel like, you know, and again, right, like general messages. This isn't going to be for everybody. This is going to be for the Geminis who are very specifically dealing with somebody who, you know, is not being very clear with their intentions. Because I don't think that that's you. Because again, I go back to the Knight of Swords, and I don't ever question the truth with that. And I feel like, you know, you did what you had to do, and you may have done it really swiftly here, you know, in needing to bring this to a close. But yet it's still there, right? Ugh, it's frustrating. Your hopes and your fears, the Ten of Pentacles. So yeah, you know, like I said, this could be about a family situation here when you're looking at the Ten of Pentacles, right? The Ten of Pentacles and the Ten of Cups. Immediately when those two show up to me, I think family. Now, this could definitely have to do with family money issues and somebody being a little bit sketchy, which is possible. You know, but then the other thing, though, too, is when you're looking at this as far as hopes and fears, you know, if you're looking at the long term, when dealing with somebody close to you, right, are you going to look at continued dysfunction, or are you going to look at, you know, a situation that is going to be something that's going to have something to show for it, like things are going to get better, get to a place of completion where everything's okay, right? But then, you know, I go right back to the Keeper of the Scales and think, you know, this is somebody who, you know, again, it's very specifically for those of you who are dealing with a person dysfunctional, and, you know, they may continuously create problems within a family situation, right? Now, for some of you, you may be looking at how it will affect your own family by dealing with this person. But like I said, I don't think that this is you. I don't think that this is you at all. I think you are the Knight of Swords, and everything that's happening around you is because of somebody who is out of whack. And then coming out The Queen of Pentacles. So now for some of you, possibly dealing with an earth sign. And like I've said before, when it comes to general readings, I look at the personality, right? So if we're looking at the Queen of Pentacles and we're talking about you, because of a person that's around you, this is, somebody who may be trying to make you feel insecure, or they are insecure, and you may be looking at this as, I don't need this. Like I've always said with her, right? She doesn't need a king to help her. She knows how to do that shit on her own. So is it that you're like, you know what? I'm sorry. I've tried to help you before, but I can't do it. I'm sorry that you're dealing with this insecurity, but then what problems are they going to be causing you ultimately in the end? And then the Ace of Swords, and I go right back to that Knight of Swords, and I think you're slapping somebody with the truth. And then not only that, but seeing the truth, right? So when we're looking at the Three of Cups, for me, with the Seven of Swords, we're talking about, some shiesty people. I don't think that this is going to have to do with the support system. As a matter of fact, if we are talking about one person in particular, they may be surrounded by a bunch of people, or they may have I look at this and think drinking problem, or, some kind of addiction, right? But it's not like the devil. It's almost like they're influenced by other people. Now, looking at the Hangman next to that, I think, some of you feel like you have to be a part of the situation. Like I see this person completely bound, and needing to see it clearly. And then you have the Ace of Swords immediately after that. So for some of you, you may be tired of waiting on somebody else to get their act together. But like I said, with the Ace of Swords, I go right back to that Knight of Swords, and I think slapping them with the truth, or finally accepting the truth that maybe, people that you're dealing with, or a person in particular, is not going to change. They have ulterior motives for trying to make a connection with you. It's almost like, and you'll know because they'll be bringing up the past. Do you remember when all these good things happened? Right? And trying to bring you in almost. But I don't think you're having it. I don't think that you're having it. And it may be one of those things where they look at you like, you're the one that can help them. You're the one that has, the resources to help them. I'm looking at the Queen of Pentacles, but I think of somebody who is very insecure. Very insecure. But how is their insecurity going to affect you ultimately coming out here? But then I see you getting to a place where, it's almost like, especially with the Ten of Swords being your advice, you're no longer going to be in that state of limbo. In trying to help them figure out their own problems. Now, if we're talking about you, right, it's finally understanding why you're in this position. But I still look at this and think, dealing with somebody who would want to take advantage of you, and then, your advice being the Ten of Swords, meaning that it needs to be done. It needs to be done. Wow. Gemini, this one's a little bit difficult. And what I think is the most difficult part about this is, if we're talking about a family member, there's definitely love there because of eternal love. But, the Keeper very specifically says as a challenge that this is about a person who is creating disharmony. And, it's funny because when I look at expansion, I think of people, expanding the people that are in your life, or the changing of people in your life. But abundance, you definitely have abundance of new growth around you, which is going to expand things in your life. And that may be why you're dealing with what you're dealing with right now. Things may be going really good for you, but then you almost have a leech, is what I feel like looking at this. And again, this is only for some of you. But I feel the struggle. I feel the struggle between, the love that's there, but then all the unfair crap that you're dealing with, But, like I said, to me, looking at expansion, it's, needing to change the people that are in your life more so than anything. Forgiveness. Wow. Nothing can be gained by holding on to past disappointments. And it's not so much that you need to forgive somebody and let them back through if they're going to continue to do some shiesty shit. It's more so that you need to forgive yourself for having, been put through that, by allowing yourself to be a part of that, it's like, okay, I'm going to forgive and let this go for me, right? Because it's just holding you back. And then you're being reminded that you are limitless. But then I feel like I want to say, though, too, that it doesn't mean that you don't love this person any less, looking at eternal love. But you can't fix them. That I feel like more so than anything. You can't fix them. And, we're not looking at the devil here, but when I see that, I think more so that this is something that has power over you, and I don't think that that's the case. But I do think that the person that you're dealing with, looking at the Three of Cups, needs to get their shit together, but I don't like this whole idea of them, like, coming through, trying to make amends, but then having ulterior motives. I would just be careful. And again, right, like, not for everybody. But, this is something that I think, needs to stay over and done with. Otherwise, you're going to continuously feel like you're being let down or hurt by somebody who may be close to you. All right, Gemini. So, like I said, I do think that this one is very specific to those of you who are dealing with somebody who may be very close to you that is having issues. And in effect, it's going to make things harder for you. Okay, so what I'm seeing here with the Seven of Swords being the overall is you're talking about, a sneaky situation. Somebody's not being clear about their intentions, but like I said, I don't think it's you. I think that this is you. Knowing this about the person you're dealing with, and, being very direct and cutting down to the truth here and being very clear with them, but then also, with the Eight of Wands, like, wanting to bring this to a close. But it's almost like, and then looking at these two, it's more so about their own financial strain or their own difficult issues that they're dealing with right now. And then, with the Eight of Wands, definitely the communication, and then you again moving into this place where you're like, I just want this to be over with, and like trying to get there with the Eight of Wands. But I think that they're coming back. And like I said, I don't think that they're being very clear about their intentions. To me, this looks like somebody who is trying to make amends, bring up things from the past, like, do you remember when? You will know. You will know if this person starts talking about the good things about the past, but like I said, they're not being very clear. Now, looking at the Ten of Swords, right, I do think that this is something that needs to stay done and over with. Otherwise, you're just going to end up right back here again. Because of them and their actions and not being very clear. I very clearly see you as the Knight of Swords. And I do think that for some of you, this is going to have to do with a family member, looking at the Ten of Pentacles. But then I also think, how is this going to affect your overall security and stability? And I see the conflict here, especially with these two showing up and then the way they work together. And this one did show up as a challenge, and it very specifically talks about people who are creating an imbalance in your life, but then with eternal love, there's clearly a lot of love for this person, especially if there is, a family connection there. Now, coming out, though, looking at the Queen of Pentacles, I think that the reason why they're, coming to you is because they feel like you may be the person to get them out of that kind of financial strain, right? But clearly here, they've got some issues that, you have, I feel like, waited for a while to see if things were going to change, looking at the Hangman. But it's almost like with the Ace of Swords, you get to this point where it's like, you know what, I finally see it. I finally see it and accept the truth that, this person is not being very clear about their intentions. And I also think insecurity when I look at her, especially with, the Seven of Swords. Somebody who's very insecure, not being clear on their intentions, but then also I look at that as you being like, I don't need this. I can't help you anymore. There isn't a question of, the giving and receiving here with the Six of Pentacles. You're just like, no. But yet you're still being brought back into it. You will know. This person will bring up the past. They're going to try to want to, in a way, make amends, but I don't think that they're actually trying to. Like, it's almost like they're trying to convince you to help them. I think is the best way to put this. And like I said, this is very specific. I feel like this is very specifically targeted toward the Geminis that are dealing with sketchy people. Now, as far as the soul trees go, abundance, new growth, and expansion. There is an abundance of new growth in your life, which is fantastic. But, you know, with expansion, I feel like this very much reminds me of expansion from Chakra Wisdom when you talk about the people that are changing in your life, bringing in new people, getting rid of people who would otherwise criticize you. That's kind of what I feel like. But, you know, regardless though, abundance of new growth that is expanding your life, which is really good. But I also think that that's the reason why you may be dealing with this person in the first place. Now, when you're looking at Whispers of Love, you are limitless. Yes, you need to remember this. You can do, you know, whatever the hell you want to do. But when you're looking at forgiveness, right, nothing can be gained by holding on to past disappointments. And I think it's more so you needing to forgive yourself for having let this person do this to you and try to do it again. This one's a little bit heavy. I would focus on you. It doesn't mean that you don't love this person any less, but, you know, that unconditional love kind of gets pushed to a point where, you know, are you being an enabler is what I want to say. You know, and I don't think that a lot of you are wanting to do this anymore because I feel like you're going right back to your own past actions on top of them trying to come back through and bring up the past. You know, you being the Knight of Swords to me is so clear. This is so clear to me. You're like, no. I would just be careful, Gemini. You know, you're going to have to look at the people in your life right now that are creating this imbalance. And you are ultimately going to have to decide here on, you know, do you want to continue to help them or be that enabler? Or is it time to say enough is enough, I can't help you anymore?